This is the first episode of the search economy. I'm really excited. I have done a lot of different podcasts. It's always this certain feeling when you're starting a new one, right? You're trying to organize, get a lot of thoughts, ideas out, getting the guest list together and everything in between. But I'm pretty excited about this topic. And I'm joined by David, and David will be running point on a lot of these conversations we're having. But I think first order of business would be to introduce David. David, tell the people who you are and what you do.
I love it. I'm excited to be here as well. For those of you who are listening, I'm the CEO of Pneuma Media. So, company's been around now for going on 5 years. We've grown quite a bit in that time, and it's been exciting. So, really excited to blow the podcast up and have some conversations all about search, which is exciting.
So yeah, we're going to be digging into search, and I'm curious just as a new member of the Pneuma team, and Pneuma's a business obviously that's uh, specializing in SEO as one of the service offerings. In your journey of starting Pneuma, why did you go in the direction of starting a business focused around search and SEO? What was it about that space that interested you?
Yeah, whenever I started my career, I was definitely in a different background, but I heard the term demand generation quite a bit from social media to all sorts of different avenues. But, everyone seemed to be obsessed with generating demand. And I always kind of question the fact of what happens to the demand that's already, in the market. People are already looking for services. Plumbing is not a new thing. Roofing is not a new thing. Whenever those needs come up, you start searching for it. You don't need to be convinced that you need a new roof. There's water coming through your roof and you go look for a new one. So I was always infatuated by demand capture, as we've coined it here at Pneuma, around let's just actually find the demand in the market and go capture it. So for us at Pneuma, and really for me, it intrigued me going after that angle because, my background is a finance and management consultant. Whenever you're in those worlds, you care about ROI, you care about how quickly you can get there, and you care about stripping out all the other parts. You just want to impact the business however you can. And capturing the demand that was already in the market for many companies is a far quicker way to ROI. But it's also far easier to track. It's far easier to show impact for. And you don't have to start from the beginning. You can find people that need your services today and go find them. So it was really the interest from a business conversation to say that, hey, this is a much better way to impact the business from a revenue side of things, but also from a market side of things. There's plenty of people looking for services that you offer. Might as well show up for those searches.
So, Search Economy is the name of the show. It is also a key piece in the story that we're trying to tell at Pneuma. A little peek behind the curtain. We are in the process, and one of my tasks is to help craft and tell the story and how we want to communicate to our audience. Um, I'm curious when we've gone through many iterations of this already. I've been here for I think 3 weeks or so, and we've gone through like 3 different cycles. Search economy is the name of our show. This is what we're talking about. When that term kind of hit your radar, just in terms of like reading through kind of what we were going to be talking about, like how did it make you feel? Like what were the thoughts that were going on in your head?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it from the initial of the search economy, but I think it brings to light a bigger point that people like to do digging before they make any type of decision. And I can give you a long story, but we've never really coined it into something as precise as the search economy, which made me excited. But it really brings to light, how people buy today before they ever reach out to you, whatever your brand or business may be. They're looking you up online. They've likely been on your website. They've likely found your socials. They likely have read content on your site if it's there. They've done their research on who you are and what you have to offer. And I think that really brings to light the fact that nowadays the customer really owns that buying process. They own when they want to reach out, how they want to reach out, and really the understanding of why they should be reaching out. So hearing search economy made me excited. One, for the search side of it, but two, as we talk about the economy, people searching for things is a good thing for businesses. It's the thing that's actually impacting the way businesses grow. It's impacting how people ultimately find other businesses, which is exciting. So bringing them together in a nice phrase is cool, but it also makes me think of a lot of our clients that we have now. Without search, they wouldn't have a business. They wouldn't have employees. They wouldn't have jobs. They wouldn't have clients either. So it's a unique way to really coin the fact that, what we're building is really unique, but putting it behind a name like Search Economy gives it such a good brand that's easy to explain and really easy to share with others.
I want to dig into that a little more. And one of these things that I've been thinking a lot about is just the way businesses have gotten in front of their customers or next customers. And it has been through more traditional advertising efforts. Like I've been talking about, newspaper ads. I've been talking about radio spots. I've been talking about billboards, TV commercials. And this is where the business is putting their message front and center for the consumer to see, and the business is in control of that placement. What's interesting to me as I'm diving into this space is with search, it reverses the course. It puts the customer in the driver's seat where the customer is in control. And I think we're in this interesting spot right now where some businesses recognize this and are adapting to it, and others are still kind of running the same playbook. So I don't know. Like you've talked to hundreds of customers just in your time at Pneuma. Like, what is that type of conversation like when you're talking with businesses who are interested in doing more with SEO? Is it a big hump to get over, or is it we know we need to do this, and that's why we're talking to you and help us understand how we kind of take that next step into this era so we can better get in front of the people who we can help?
Yeah. I think whenever people come to chat with us, it's a good representation of the search economy itself. They have a good understanding of maybe what SEO is, but the biggest question we always get is, okay, how does it apply to us? And I think the thing that I always hit with clients and really come back to over and over, SEO isn't anything special. I think we hear SEO and we're like, oh, that's a black box of something. Like it's complicated. It requires a lot of steps. What's this backlink thing and like domain authority? What's that? Um, Really, what it comes down to though is that whenever people search, they're searching for solutions. They're searching for answers to their questions, solutions to their problems. What I always like to start with is hey, brand or business, have you solved someone's problem before? And they're like, oh yeah, totally. Like we solve people's problems all the time, or we help customers all the time, or here's how many customers we have. Like, of course we've done that. SEO really just becomes okay, what is that problem you solved? What are people asking as they're considering a solution for that problem? Let's write content there. Let's write content for, what these people are likely asking before they ever reach out to you and start to recreate what your customers are likely doing before they ever even find you. Because I think the interesting thing too is you can certainly build a business without being active on the search side of things. You can build a business without SEO. You can certainly build a business without Google Ads, maybe even build a business without a website. You're definitely going to make it harder on yourself though. So one big point that I always bring to clients is that, hey, you might have a very successful business as it is without a website, without SEO, without Google Ads. This is great that we're about to layer that on because you've only made it harder on yourself. If we can find what makes you unique as a business and put that in front of searchers in your area or across the nation that are looking for the things that you have to offer, that's when it gets exciting. You can certainly do it without, but having those items in your back pocket and as a tactical part of what you're doing in your go to market is really exciting. And I think the biggest thing that starts to demystify it is, what are the questions that your customers were asking before they ever purchased from you? Let's start there. What are the types of things you're hearing in a sales conversation? What are the types of things that you're hearing in onboarding or post sale that we can use to create content that's not only helpful for your brand that people are going to read when they go look at your website, but that can also capture people and capture the demand that's in the market and get them some awareness about what you do.
I was sharing this example with you all recently. And when we were having a conversation when I was in Denver, my wife texted me a picture of our water heater. And just 2 weeks after our furnace went out in the house we've lived in for a year, our water heater had busted. And so those are fun moments as being a homeowner. And so the first thing I did was search Indianapolis plumbers. And you get through all the sponsored stuff and you look at results 1 through 3. I think result 3 was a list of Indianapolis plumbers, and then 1 and 2 to me were brands that I had some awareness around, but those were the first brands I went to start the process of trying to get estimates and go through the whole rigmarole that we go through when we need things in our home or other areas of our life. And I think about that, and I think about how many plumbing companies exist in Indiana, and how many I didn't even get a chance. How important is it for businesses to show up in that page one, as opposed to just showing up in general in terms of like getting an at bat or getting a chance at someone's business?
I think you said something that actually paints a really good picture there. The first two listings you had some familiarity of, but you didn't start with the brand. You didn't start by searching their name. You just went back to the key search, Indianapolis Plumbers. And I think a lot of people do that. I think they'll, the traditional way of doing the business is really traditional. The billboard on the highway, but even less traditional. Like you might do some demand generation. You might sponsor a few things. You might get your logo or name on some type of jersey. There's a lot that you can do there. But I think the funny thing is even when you advertise yourself and you build brand awareness, when someone's in need, you're relying on them to remember, oh, I saw that ad on the highway 4 months ago. Most people don't remember what they did yesterday, and that's totally fine. But I think we have to realize that even if you do all the advertising, you're generating demand not only for yourself, but really for the service that you're offering, which is plumbing. I don't think you got to generate a lot of demand for plumbing. If it's broken, it's broken. People know who they need to call. So I'd say for you as well, like I thought it was interesting. You had some familiarity, but you didn't start with them. You started with the actual search term that is what people are going to Google. And I think it's really important that think about all the other companies and customers that are out there generating demand for HVAC services, let's say. If they're not popping up first, somebody like you is probably seeing those and saying, "Oh, great, my heat's not working great, or my AC is not working great. I should go follow up with them or reach out to them." You won't remember the brand. You'll go home, you'll Google Indianapolis HVAC, and you might find a completely different brand that's going to benefit from the demand that someone else generated. So I think it's funny that, as you say, I had some familiarity. You didn't start with them, and I think that's the biggest thing is that even if people are aware of your brand, when push comes to shove, they're likely searching the non-branded search term or really the name of the service that you're offering. They're not searching for you 9 times out of 10. And it's super important to show up for that non-branded search because of something else you did. You only went to the first two. You didn't go to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You certainly didn't go to the second page. I think those spots are really valuable because when it comes down to Indianapolis, HVAC or Indianapolis plumbing, if you're a company that offers those things, you want to show up in the top two. Because if somebody searches for those, that's pretty much all they're looking for. They might venture down to 4 or 5, maybe 6th, 7th, and 8th position on Google. They're not going much farther.
So one of the phrases we've been talking a lot about at Numa is, and you've touched on it here, is this idea of stop just creating demand and start capturing that. I want to like focus in on that phrase and have you maybe share from a customer perspective, what does creating demand mean, and what does it get and not get you, and what does capture demand mean, and what does it get or not get you?
Yeah, I bring it back to if you're listening to this, you've likely seen a marketing funnel before, at least the diagram of one. I think creating demand lives a lot at the top of funnel. It's creating an interest or desire in what you do as a company. I think we don't offer those services, but I think a lot of times where that goes wrong is that you end up creating demand around the service that you offer, not around you as a company. Creating demand a lot of times is making your company unique so you stand out in the market. But 9 times out of 10, and this is why we are in business and our clients have been successful, you just create demand around a service. And the reason I don't think that's all that important is, again, there are certain services that we don't need to create more demand for. They become important based off of an action or a certain time or an event in someone's life. Like your wife sending you a text saying the hot water heater is not working. That's an event that creates demand. No marketing is going to create that demand. It's just, I have a pain point. Now I need it solved. I didn't need it solved yesterday, but I need it solved today. So we like focusing on the businesses that really rely on that type of buyer behavior. And the reason that is creating demand, there are certainly pros of it, but there are a lot of cons as well. By creating demand, you're taking your business or company and talking to many people. It's not always targeted. You don't know if those people are interested. You actually don't quite know who all is looking at that as well. The reason I like capturing demand is because we never have a conversation of saying, those aren't the right people. They are, because they're searching for my HVA system or my hot water heater is broken or Indianapolis HVAC. Clearly, if they're searching that, they have some type of pain point that means they need to come to the site. For us, where creating demand's a little bit of a hazy gray area, I like the capturing demand because we know who we're dealing with. If these people are searching for certain search terms, I have a very good understanding of their intent behind the search, why they're reaching out, and potentially how we can help them before ever talking to them. So instead of us throwing out a fishing net and hoping that we catch something, people are coming straight to us and saying, "Hey, I know you have the service because I searched you, I found you. How can I get started? What's the next step? How can you help me?" And there's a really cool benefit that whenever your marketing produces conversations of what's the next step and how can you help me, rather than what do you do and why is it important, that is where we really lie, right? I want to create conversations for companies where people are like, yeah, read your website, this is great, but what's next? How can you help me? How can you come fix my hot water heater? You're not asking the question of, well, is it important to fix a hot water heater? You know it is. I don't need to convince you of that. I just need to convince you that we're the right team. And at that point, if you're popping up one or two, you at least have an at bat there, but you're going to get a majority of the at bats and a majority of those conversations. So, kind of as a longer summary, I think a lot of that creating demand lives at the top of the funnel, but it also lives in this gray area. It's hard to track, it's hard to really showcase or prove the day to day ROI. But there's a lot of wasted time, energy, and money in that because you're really shouting from the rooftops and hoping the right people hear you. If you flip it on its head, when we start to capture that demand, it's a little bit different. We're capturing the people that are already searching for our services. They're convinced that it's important. They're convinced that they need it. You just need to convince them that you're the right fit. And showing up first or second or third in Google is the quickest way to do that.
I've gathered that you have definitely an interest on the finance side and a background on the finance side from our conversations. And I would imagine in that setting where you're trying to talk about something like search and capturing demand versus creating demand with a smaller independent business owner, like, there's only so much budget. So how do you navigate that conversation regarding, and it's situational, I'm sure, but how do you navigate that conversation that's this is where we should allocate our marketing budget to creating demand, and this is how much we should allocate our marketing budget to capture demand? Like, how do you think about that, and how do you have those types of conversations?
Yeah, I think it really lies in where their whole marketing mix is and what they're currently doing. I often find for a lot of our clients, they might have other initiatives in place where they're creating demand. Sometimes they'll sponsor, a little league t-ball shirt. I use that as a fun example, but like that's getting your name out in the community in front of people. You might do some speaking events, some networking, some coffee dates, so to speak, right? Those are all great ways to create demand. And even on top of that, they might be active on social, they might be active on running a few different places for advertising. But I'm always a big believer of start your marketing mix closest to revenue and work backwards. And what I mean by that, if you're a new company, or even if you're a more mature company and you're just looking to grow your presence and you've done no marketing, no strategic marketing even up to this date, it makes a lot more sense to start closer to revenue and work your way backwards rather than starting at the very tip top of the funnel and waiting for some of the results to follow through and get all the way down to the point to where they're ready to buy. I always recommend to brands, if we have no marketing mix or maybe a younger or less strategic marketing mix, let's dive headfirst into the stuff that's closest to revenue for twofold. Even if you have a limited budget, I've often heard, hey, I have a limited budget, but as soon as I see results, I'll increase spend. And for us, that's happened quite a bit. It's easier to show results, honestly, from a client management side of things. If we can start closer to revenue and say, hey, we're 14 days in, we just got a lead. Like, again, we're 14 days in. There's so much more work that we can do. That's exciting. So I think the quicker that we can show that and quicker that we can show results keeps our clients happy. But think of the client side, you're investing in marketing. Like, we've all talked about it before and all talked about it as it's needed, but it can be daunting to take something that doesn't really have a budget associated with it, or maybe spend more than you were expecting to see those results quicker. It's like, all right, we're going to be good. This is the right move. There's so much more work to be done and it's already working. But I'd say the other thing as well, if you just look at the math on it, Indianapolis HVAC. I'm sure I could pull it up, but I bet it has 4, 5, 600 searches a month, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. The reality is that hot water heater, one customer, maybe an additional two customers for that company from an SEO side of things, pays for an entire SEO investment for that month. That's a really cool place to be, because for some of these keywords and some of the searches you go after, it's not going to produce one or two customers. It might produce more than that. Again, there's nuance. Every conversation, every client's a little bit different. But when you sit down and really look at the metrics as well, the cool thing about capturing demand is not only the fact that it can pay for itself fairly quickly. It's closer to revenue than creating demand. It also stacks upon itself. Once you get a ranking for a keyword, there's a good chance you're going to keep that ranking. We can use next month to go get a second ranking, and then a third ranking, and then a fourth ranking. And over time, you really start to build a true asset or portfolio for your business that anytime somebody searches for what you do, you're in that conversation and popping up.
Part about doing an episode 1 is to set it up. And this is what we're doing, setting up the ideas, setting up the topics, the types of things that we're going to be talking about. And I know we've talked a lot about this kind of behind the scenes, but would love for you to share with listeners where your head is at. Who, in your mind, is the search economy for? Like, why are we creating the show, and kind of who is this going to be built for?
Yeah, I think if you're a business owner, even, someone that works in a marketing function at one of these businesses, I think this conversation, really the podcast, is for you. If you're the type of business where, what you do as a service isn't all that crazy. People understand inherently what they do. They might have even purchased from you or another vendor in the past. Think HVAC. If you're living in a house or an apartment, that impacts your day to day. Think plumbing, roofing, but even think broader around professional services and consumer services. We typically focus on as a vendor or an agency. And the reason is because every single person who has purchased from a consumer services company or a vendor services company, they always search prior. I shouldn't say always. I think it's like 90% of them search for you or search for your services prior to ever reaching out. That stat alone, I think, is the argument of, if you have consumer services or a professional services firm, if you're working with a business or with a consumer, and before they pay you, it requires you to have a conversation with that customer, this is the right podcast for you. And capturing demand is likely the right strategy for you because of that one stat. A vast majority of your customers are looking you up before they ever come to you. Again, you can build a business without it, but once you start layering this in, you'll find that many conversations happen that your brand has never taken place in if you're not ranking highly on Google. And I really think it comes down to the fact that, there's some companies where people can buy right off the site, never talking to a person. That's okay. For a vast majority of these companies, though, that we work with, that's not the reality. And I'd say a vast majority of companies in America, it's still people to people. Well, there's a brand or a business to it. People are still buying from someone else. If you're, again, if you're consumer services or professional services, and before someone purchases, it requires, or you require, or the process requires you to have a conversation with that customer. That means they're likely searching for you prior. And this is definitely the place to listen, because we'll give you plenty of tactical insight on how to optimize that, but really how to think about that and mixing it into the entire strategy that you have for your company.
I think what's really fun about this is the fact that you all out there, you'll hear from us, but you're probably the most beneficial thing you're going to get out of this show is the fact that we are curating guests who are going through the search economy now and winning and doing really great work. And so we're going to bring them on and share their ideas with you. As a matter of fact, we're lining up the first slew of guests this morning, and the response was awesome. So I'm excited to bring some of those voices to this show. And David, I would love, it's been like drinking from a fire hose trying to gather all this information about all these customers and businesses doing all these great things. Maybe like we round the corner of this episode, round turn 4. I know you're a racing guy.
There you go.
And maybe like spotlight, like what is like a potential example of a business who's kind of thriving right now in the search economy, just so the listeners can have some idea of kind of who they'll be hearing from and stories that they can expect.
Yeah, I look at one of our, I think it's potentially our first actual guest on the podcast, Superior Attic. I'm really excited to have Jonathan come onto the podcast, share his story, because while you and I can talk about it, I'm really excited to again hear it in his words about the impact we've been able to create, but how he thinks about this as well. Um, I think from Jonathan, I won't spoil too much, but as he looks at his marketing mix, there's a lot that he was doing prior that was exciting. I would even say sexy, right? It's fun to do social and fun to do certain things like that. But he crunches his numbers like no one I've ever seen. I mean, he's got a dashboard and he's got every single metric about his business on there, and he watches it like a hawk, which is incredible. Um, Came to realize that some of the more, maybe boring things that we were doing, some of the more minute blogging, page creation, backlink creation, all of a sudden created 40% of his leads, and then 50, and then 60, and then 70, and then 80% of his leads, to where now it's like, oh my goodness, I got to do more over here, because not only is it working, not only is it, really compounding upon itself. Whenever I look at revenue and I look at leads and I look at what's generating the most revenue for me, or when I talk to our customers qualitatively and ask them where they found us, I don't hear anything else other than Google. And that's the sign that I'm really excited to dive into, because I think there are a lot of agencies out there. And even, in the past, I'd worked with plenty of them. They do a lot of great work, but that connection to revenue and the understanding of how this impacts your business is one of the most exciting things that I think we can do. If we can all point back and say, get granular, these blogs, these keywords, these, links that we build, all the technical stuff, that's cool. But here's the revenue that it produced. Here's the customers that it sent your way. Here's the impact it had on your business. And then it's honestly great. And I know Jonathan will pull this out. Here's the impact we had on your business. Who are you hiring because of that? Your business has grown so much. Are you going to add more sales staff, more admin staff? Like, it's really cool for us to grow those companies that are growing the communities, or the ones giving back, and the ones that are really, building a foothold in their certain areas of the US and maybe even abroad, that we can really make an impact for, which is exciting.
If you're listening to this, you're a day one. We appreciate you. You probably saw this on social or somewhere. We'll be here regularly talking about the search economy. Appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thanks a lot, David.